Come before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
And the live stream and on JBS, we welcome you to our Passover Festival morning service. We join in song together this morning with the words of Hava Nashira. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. 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 Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. Hava.
Boker Tov, good morning, and Chag Sameach. We are so happy to be together this morning to continue our communal celebration of Passover. Between the rising temperatures and the rising vaccination rates, it really does feel like we are coming out of a Mitzrayim, a narrow place, into a place that is broader and lighter and more hopeful. In this service, we will bring together the hope of this moment with the joy of our Passover holiday for a shacharit filled with song. And speaking of beautiful music, I know that you will sing and clap and sway along too. I am thrilled to be joined this morning by our cantorial intern, Jenna McMillan. I am rabbinic intern Chelsea Fuchs, and I want to extend a very warm welcome to anyone joining Central Services for the first time. And of course, it is lovely to have our returning viewers and regular participants as well. As a logistical note, you are invited to follow along with our order of service and download resources for text study later, all on the Central Synagogue website, centralsynagogue.org. We will begin our service with the words of Elohai Neshama, found on page 422. My God, the soul you have given me is pure.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shinatata bi Tehorahi. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shinatata bi Tehorahi. Ata berata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi, ve'ata mishah.
We read in English on page 447. Even if our mouths were full of song as the sea, and our tongues full of joy in countless waves, and our lips full of praise as wide as the sky's expanse, and were our eyes to shine like sun and moon, if our hands were spread out like heaven's eagles, and our feet swift like young deer, we could never thank you adequately, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to bless your name for a 10,000th of the many myriads of times you granted favor to our ancestors and to us. We now begin a special portion of our service, Hallel, or Psalms of Praise. These extra songs are recited on several Jewish holidays, and they celebrate the many blessings bestowed upon our people throughout history. They also remind us of the blessings that we continue to enjoy today. The blessing of being part of a community, of finding a place to belong, of feeling loved by a force larger than ourselves. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we turn to page 560.
Shanu b'mitzotav v'tzivanu likra et Hallel.
Page 562.
B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'amnois, Hayta Yehuda lekodsho, Yisrael mamshelotav, Hayam vayanos, Hayadeni sov leachor, Harim rakedu cherim, Givot kivnei tzon, Malecha hayam kitanus, Hayadin tisov leachor, Harim tirkedu cherim, Givot kivnei tzon, Milifnei Adon chuli aretz, Milifnei Eloi Yaakov, Ha'ovchi Hatzura gamayim, Chaloi mishlemayno mayim, B'tzeit Yisrael Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'amlois.
Page 566.
Ozi v'zimratia vayhili lishua. Ozi v'zimratia vayhili lishua. Ozi v'zimratia vayhili lishua. Ozi v'zimratia vayhili lishua. Ozi v'zimratia vayhili lishua.
Page 567, Pithuli.
Sharei tzedek שערי צדק, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה, ביטחוני שערי צדק, ביטחוני שערי צדק, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה, אבובם אודיה.
And we now rise in body or in spirit for our call to worship the Baruch Hu on page 452.
We read at the bottom of page 455. In the beginning, even then, a new light was sown for the righteous, a promise that your light would become the catalyst, first for order and then for hope. Author of language and light, help us to use words as you have, to cast light into dark waters and draw out justice and truth.
Page 456.
Ahava rabba, ahavtanu, Adonai, Eloheinu, chemla gedola, v'tera, chamalta aleinu, ahava
את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you, Adonai, among the gods who are worshipped? This is really more of a declaration than a question, punctuated in our prayer book with an exclamation point. No matter what you believe about the historical accuracy of the Exodus, there is something amazing about a story in which the laws of nature were turned on their heads for the purpose of bringing an oppressed people toward freedom. Thousands of years later, we still celebrate the lengths that God went to in order to bring justice to the world. How great are our efforts to bring about fairness and equality? May we invest so wholeheartedly in this work that we transform this question into an exclamation.
ישראל ופדי חילומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Today is the day that we switch from saying Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem in the Amidah, our standing prayer, to saying Morid Hatal. The former is a prayer for rain, while the latter is a more modest prayer for dew. Given today's weather, it is ironic to stop praying for rain, at least here in New York. We are about to enter the month of April, and as the saying goes, April showers bring May flowers. But this shift is a powerful way that Jews living around the world stay connected to Israel. Rather than follow our own seasons, we acknowledge the cycle of the year as it plays out in that beautiful land where poppies are just beginning to bloom. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and turn to page 468 as we join with each other and with Jews all over the world in reciting the Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Koneh Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imaot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor leolam Adonai, v'chayei meitim ata rav lehoshia, marid hatal, mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayei meitim berachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofei cholim, umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afar. Micha mocha bal givurot umido melach. Melech mimit umechaye umatzmiach Yeshua. V'neheman atalachayot metim. Baruch atah Adonai mechaye hametim. מקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוא הארץ, כבודו, אדיר אדירנו, אדוני
We continue reading on page 480. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, ya'aleh v'yavo v'yizacher zichronenu, v'zichron kol amcha beit Yisrael lefanecha, letova, lechen ulechesed, ulerachamim, lechaim uleshalom, b'yom chag hamatzot hazeh. Our God and God of our ancestors, be mindful of your people Israel, and recall our merit for good and grace, and in loving kindness and compassion for life and peace on this festival of Pesach.
Zochirinu Adonai Eloheinu b'al tova.
Amen.
Ufokedenu v'livracha.
Amen.
Ve'hoshinu v'lechayim.
Amen.
We continue now with silent prayer.
Such a beautiful song, and obviously even more beautiful when sung by Jenna. So I would love for us to turn together to some Torah study before we hear Jenna beautifully chant some words of Torah for us later. I am going to share my screen, which is a real test of my technical abilities. All right. And this morning, we are going to have a Passover text study that I've titled Insiders and Outsiders, and that will be the theme that guides us through these texts. And as I teach and as you all share your thoughts and teach us, I just want to let our viewers know that I will be following along in the Facebook chat. So any questions I pose that you have answers to, or any questions of your own that you want to pose, I invite you to share your thoughts in the Facebook chat, and I'll be reading along to learn so that we can learn together here in this virtual format. And no surprise, Ed has shared the link very helpfully. Thank you so much. Okay, so we begin with part of our story, which I think will be very familiar to anyone who had Seder last night. And it is a number of verses from Exodus that help explain how we get ourselves into the situation in which the Israelites were enslaved. And I will start out by reading this. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them, so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground. So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, Pitom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made life bitter for them with harsh labor at mortar and bricks and with all sorts of tasks in the field. So my first two questions, and I'll pose them at once. That way, if you have a thought on either one, you can post in the Facebook chat. One is that Joseph was the ultimate insider. He served as second in command over the entire Egyptian kingdom. What shifted to make his people outsiders in that same realm? And as a second question, why did the new Pharaoh think the Israelites would join with outside enemies? How might the story have unfolded differently without that assumption? So as I wait for some of your thoughts to come in the Facebook chat, I'll share this thought, which is that even though it says that a new Pharaoh arose who didn't know Joseph, I think that it's pretty unlikely and not very believable that this new Pharaoh had never heard anything of Joseph at all, right? He was the Grand Vizier. He was the second in command, second only to the old Pharaoh. But he didn't know him personally. And without that relationship, a lot changes. I think especially when a type of xenophobia takes over, that past contributions that someone has made and these past relationships were so quickly devalued. All right. And as you think over these questions, I'll also share another thought, which is that what this shows us, the fact that this changed so quickly, that one new Pharaoh comes in who didn't have this personal relationship, and suddenly you move from insider to outsider, it shows how fickle and changeable these categories are, which I think reminds us not to get too comfortable being on the insider course, because you never really know how long that's going to last for. Let's see, we have a thought here. Maybe because the Israelites were the strangers and were wanderers. Yes, right, the Israelites were not native to that land. They also all lived in one area in Goshen all together. So maybe it made the integration hard among the rest of the Egyptians. Yes, Ed shares often, quote unquote, leaders become paranoid and fearful of the people they, quote unquote, lead. Very, very good point. A lot of our politics since ancient history has been driven by fear, unfortunately. Arden shares, we do better when we are each other's neighbors. It's harder to generalize when we know individuals from other groups. That's a great point, and I think goes bolsters the point that the personal relationship that Joseph had was so important. And when you lack those personal relationships, it can be really hard to continue to see the humanity in another person. Todd shares lack of knowledge and fear of someone not from there originally. We've certainly seen that a lot over history. Paula shares, this raises questions of assimilation versus keeping a tight hold to a separate community. It has always been a challenge for Jews to maintain their beliefs and traditions while being part of another state. That question of assimilation versus separation, and how much do you maintain a particular identity versus blending in, and what might the effects of that be if you combine it with a leader who has a xenophobic tendency. Abe shares, enjoy the freedom of today and prepare for the possibilities of the future. Well, we will be getting into that further. Yes, it's I always love when someone can sort of preface what's going to happen in the rest of the text study. All right. All right. Any last thoughts before I move to the next text? The other thing about how the story could have unfolded differently that I just want to share is that without this xenophobia and thoughts of like Egyptian elitism or supremacy, that the Jews could have been seen as an asset to the people of Egypt, right? Had they been made to feel more included and incorporated in the society, that assumption of joining with an enemy people may not have been there, which is really a fault of leadership. Okay, we will move to the second text now, which I would love to invite Jenna to read for us, just so that you don't only hear my voice.
Of course. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "This must be a Hebrew child." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water."
Thank you so much, Jenna. Okay, so this surprisingly is we don't get so much of the story of Moses individually in our Haggadah. We get the story of the Israelite people as a whole in our Haggadah, but this is Moses's origin story. This is when he was born, despite the fact that there was a decree by Pharaoh that the male Israelite babies should be thrown into the Nile. And there's a tremendous amount, I think, as someone pointed out in the chat, there's a tremendous amount of love in this scene. There's a lot going on here, which we will delve into. I'll throw out my 2 questions first, and then talk a little bit more about my thoughts as I wait for some of your thoughts to come in the Facebook chat. The first question is this. Pharaoh's daughter, who is later called Batya, was an insider in the Egyptian monarchy. Her status and her identity were tied to Pharaoh. Was being an insider a help or a hindrance when it came to saving Moses? And the second question is, do you think gender had an impact on the way this scene unfolded? And if yes, how so? Anyone who's in my Women in Tanakh class will know that, of course, I think that gender played a role in this, as I think it plays a role in most things. But before getting into those answers as they are coming in, I'll just share that I think it's amazing how clear the text is about what's happening here. Pharaoh's daughter goes down to the Nile. She doesn't do this in secret, take this baby out of the water. She sends a maiden to go and get him. And in addition, she exclaims, "This must be a Hebrew child." So if there's any part of you that's thinking that Pharaoh's daughter doesn't know exactly what she's doing, defying her father's order, there it is right in the text. She knows what she's doing and she's ignoring his order anyway. And then she manages to get Yocheved, the mother, the actual mother of this child, not just some nursemaid, and reunite them, at least for a brief period of time, as long as they could, manage under this decree. And she pays her wages. There's sort of this alternative economy that's happening here as well. So I think this scene is incredibly powerful, and some of you do too. I see comments coming in. Let me read through them. Sasha says that there is respect for the birth mother and birth family and the attachment between them all. Pharaoh's daughter is a role model for foster parents and adoptive parents. It's beautiful. Yeah. Women's empathetic nature perhaps coming out here. Todd says it was an act of courage and civil disobedience. She was getting in good trouble. Absolutely, absolutely. A true act of courage from an insider, Cynthia says. Yeah, I think that it's something really powerful. And on the one hand, being an insider could be a hindrance, right? You are in the middle of this realm that is so oppressive. And the air that you're breathing and the water that you're swimming in, although I guess not from the Nile, so maybe that's the wrong metaphor, but the air that you're breathing is so xenophobic and it's so anti-Israelite, and yet she stands up in the face of that and sees the humanity in the other. But also maybe there was a help here. She had potentially the ability to think that the punishments would be a little bit more muted for her. She is an insider and she's breaking the rules, but maybe by being an insider and having that power, I wonder if she had a little bit more security in her position. Right, Paula Hunker says, Pharaoh's daughter may have been the only one who could take such a step without fear of retribution, and it could only be conceivable that a woman would have that kind of maternal heart for the child as well as for the nurse/mother. I think that that's really powerful when it comes to the question of gender. Right, this entire scene includes only women. And while I don't think that that by nature women care more for children than anyone else, I think in this society, what we have is an issue where women are not in the center of power. Right? And men are really invested in this militarism and in this national identity in a way that I'm not sure that the women are. And they're able to connect across difference and see the humanity one mother to another. And it's very powerful, and they're not the only ones to do it. Also, Shifra and Pua, the nursemaids who refused to kill the Hebrew babies and go back and defy Pharaoh, are very, very powerful. Pharaoh really has a blind spot when it comes to women. It's pretty much entirely women who save Moses and help topple this oppressive regime. And the last thing that I'll say about that is that I think it's really symbolic. If you think about the image of Pharaoh's daughter, the palace is up above, and that's the area that thinks that it has all the power, but this river down below is where the women go, and it's undermining, it's subversive. It's not following along with the will and the whims of that upper body. Wonderful. Thank you all for your thoughts on this. We will move to the third text, which is a little bit different in nature, not coming from the Torah, but coming from a book called Masechet Gan Eden, the 7 realms of the women in Gan Eden. So Gan Eden is the Hebrew term for heaven. And it's not something that we talk about a ton, but there's a very powerful image here that I wanted to share with you. And it says this of the first realm of Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, or heaven, on the north side, excuse me, are 7 prepared realms and palaces for the righteous women in Israel who performed meritorious deeds for the Holy Blessed One by giving charity and from the merits of the Torah of their children. In the first realm will be found Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh. How many will be righteous women that are there? All those who reared orphans, showed kindness to scholars, showing the hospitality of their husbands, and giving charity secretly. Every day they are crowned with a shining crown of the splendor of the Shekhinah, and they proclaim over it, the house, blessed are you who fortify and continue the growth of the branch of splendor in the world. So a little bit less straightforward of a text to read. These imaginings of heaven get a little bit difficult to follow sometimes. But what we learn here in this text is that the rabbis in medieval times conceived of Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, as not only being in Gan Eden, but ruling over Gan Eden. And so I have a few questions on that I would love to hear your thoughts on. The first one is that Batya was not born into the Israelite tribe. And in that way, she could be seen as an outsider when it comes to our tradition. What impact does it have on you to see that she is imagined as not only inhabiting, but ruling over part of Gan Eden? And the second question is, what modern day acts can you think of that would follow the example set by Batya? How can we be like her? And as I wait for some answers to come in, I think it's important to say about Batya being in Gan Eden that part of what it shows is that you don't need to be born into the Israelite people to be an incredibly valued member of this people, of the Jewish people. So there are different stories about Batya. According to the Torah text, we don't learn anything about her changing religions. So I think on the one hand, this could show how important non-Jews are to the story of the Jewish people. And on the other hand, there are some rabbis who created other midrash about extra biblical stories concerning Batya, in which they say that she converted. And in that case, I think that this shows how integral converts are to the Jewish people and how much stronger they make our tapestry as a full people. Adam says that the covenant extends to anyone who protects and loves God's tribe. Yeah, I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. Deb says she took the high road and did the right thing. Insider or outsider, she was a mensch by her act of kindness. Absolutely, absolutely. Laura says, treat all people equally regardless of the origin. And Ed says, to not think of people based on the group they may be or their sex, but simply as human beings is something to work toward and aspire to. 100%. That's part of how we can bring this energy into our lives today and follow her example. Paula, you anticipated exactly what I was going to say. You said, it makes me think of the tribute to the righteous Gentiles in Yad Vashem who saved Jews in the Holocaust. Goodness, especially in courage, is not bound by religion. I think of Batya as being the prime example, the first example, really, of a righteous among the nation, right? So we call people who saved Jews during the Holocaust not for profit, just out of goodness and morality. We call them righteous among the nations. And I think that that's exactly what she did. She was faced with a genocidal decree, and instead of leaning into that, despite all of the benefits that could have to her, given her status, given her power, and all the downsides that could happen for not engaging, she decides that humanity of the other person is what matters the most. And that she's going to save Moses anyway. And certainly, I think that that earns her a spot in the heavens that the rabbis imagine. Okay, and then the last question that I had, which really leads me into my final point as we come to a close in our text study, was how can we, like Batya, complicate and break down the categories of insider and outsider and just focus on doing what's right? And I really think that what we're seeing here, Batya in the first text that we read of her was an insider of the Egyptian monarchy, and then she becomes an insider in the Jewish heaven. and could have been seen as an outsider in either one. And really what we're learning here is that your category can always shift. So who is an insider today may not be one tomorrow. And it's important to always imagine what could happen if you became an outsider, if you became vulnerable, and to make sure that treatment of that group of people is something that you would approve of personally for yourself, because you really never know. Which I think leads to the final point, which is perhaps the most repeated lesson in our entire Torah, which we read just one example of in Exodus 22. It's the sort of main moral lesson that we pull out of the Exodus. And it's, you shall not wrong the stranger or oppress him or her or them, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This quote is repeated dozens of times in the Torah, and it reminds us that even when we achieve insider status, and even when we are the ones in power, we must always remember what it's like to be powerless and vulnerable. The fact that Pharaoh's daughter, Batya, originally an outsider to our group, best embodies this ethical approach, should make the message of this all the more powerful. These categories are not stagnant, and we can and we should always be working to break them down. May we see a future with no outsiders, where we're all insiders and connected together. And I am very happy to transition back over to Jenna for some beautiful chanting and words of Torah.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for teaching us all today. I can speak for everyone when I say that this community is so lucky to have you as our teacher. And such wisdom in the comments today. Wow, blown away. So we are now shifting to our Torah service, just a brief chanting of Exodus 13, verses 6 through 10. This is the portion that talks about the commandment to observe Pesach and to eat unleavened bread for the duration of the 7 days. So we join together in the blessing to study Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav la'asok b'divrei Torah. Shivat yamim tochal matzot uvayom hashvi'i chag l'Adonai matzot ye'achel et shivat hayamim v'lo yera elecha chametz v'lo yera elecha seor bechol givulecha v'higadeta levincha bayom hahu lemor Bavor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim v'haya lecha leot al yadcha ulzikaron beit einecha leman tihye Torat Adonai b'ficha Ki biyad chazaka hotziacha Adonai mimitzrayim v'shamarta et hachuka hazot lemoada miyamim yamima.
Healer of the brokenhearted, binder of our wounds, counter of uncountable stars, you know who we are. This poetic interpretation of Psalm 147 reminds us that while we use psalms to sing out in joyful praise of Adonai, especially in a morning service with Hallel, we also engage with our tradition in times of pain to find comfort and healing. I invite you to share in the chat or aloud in your space the name of anyone who is in need of healing in your life, whether of body, of mind, or spirit. May the God of our tradition grant them well-being, presence, and comfort.
מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. מי שברך אמותינו, שרה, רבקה, לאה ורחל. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well. Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your hope. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. מי שברך אמותינו, שרה, רבקה, לאה ורחל. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well.
We now rise as a community for V'hashevota within our Aleinu prayer. Repeat after me.
והשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
As we turn our thoughts to those we love who are no longer with us, this short poem expresses what it means to continue on in the wake of loss. Separation by W.S. Merwin. Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle. Everything I do is stitched with its color. Although our days may be colored in part by loss, may we also infuse the world with the bright, vibrant, and deep hues of those we loved. If you are in a traditional period of mourning, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and share the names of your loved ones aloud or in the chat, whether you are in Shiva, the first week after the loss of a loved one, Shloshim, the first month after a loss, Shana, the first year, or if you are observing a yahrzeit, the anniversary of a loss. If someone is on your mind this morning, I invite you to share their names and to rise as well. And we all rise in body or in spirit to support all who mourn. We read together on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mivarach le'olam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal. Shmei de Kudashah B'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'ama v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'hayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen.
We both want to thank everyone for attending our service this morning. It was a beautiful morning to sing together and to praise God, and such rich discussion. We conclude with the words of Havana Shira, the ones we began with, and we wish everyone a Chag Sameach. Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. 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 Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah. Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah. Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah.
Boker Tov, Chag Sameach.
Boker Or, Chag Sameach.